You finally get to the end of the process and you receive your green card in the mail. But when you look at your green card, the category starts with the letters CR. I've made a lot of videos about the I-751, which is the petition to remove conditions on your residency. But I haven't made any videos discussing what to do if your I-751 petition gets denied. So today I'm going to be discussing that. I'm going to start by going a little bit through what the I-751 is, what the procedure looks like, and some strategies that we can employ if your I-751 gets denied so that you can retain your permanent residence, your green card, so that you can keep living and working and traveling in and out of the United States. Let's start by discussing what is the I-751. The I-751 is a form that conditional residents must submit within 2 years of becoming a permanent resident. Let's say that you're an immigrant living in the US and you recently married a US citizen. And you want to apply for your green card now that you're married to a US citizen. You meet all the other requirements, you just have to go through the process. You finally get to the end of the process and you receive your green card in the mail. But when you look at your green card, the category starts with the letters CR. And you're wondering, what does that mean? Well, it means you're a conditional resident. And the reason your residency is conditional is because the day your green card got approved was within 2 years of your date of marriage. So if you think back, you must have gotten married less than 2 years ago. And for that reason, Congress wants to make sure that your marriage was entered into in good faith, and they made your residency conditional. Now, what do you have to do to remove the conditions on your green card? You'll see the expiration date on this conditional green card is 2 years after the card was issued. So in 2 years, your conditional status will expire. Before it expires, within 90 days before it expires, we must file the form I-751 with updated evidence, additional evidence showing that you and your US citizen spouse are still in a good faith marriage. We send that to USCIS. They will automatically extend your conditional status and allow you to keep living in the US as a permanent resident while they process this I-751 petition. Let's say, for an example, 2 years later, you receive a notice in the mail saying your I-751 was denied. Now what do you do? Before I get really deep into the weeds, I just want to explain one practical point. USCIS will take the position that once your conditional status has been denied, you are out of status. But the other immigration agencies will take the position that the only way you can lose your green card is if you sign an I-407 abandonment of green card form, if you voluntarily abandon it, or if an immigration judge orders you removed. So actually, when your I-751 got denied, there is a strong argument to be made that you continued to be a permanent resident until your case gets transferred to a court and a judge takes away your residency. That's just a practical point. I explain that to people a lot, and it's a little confusing because various government agencies that are all tasked with running our immigration system have different interpretations of what actually happens to your status when that form is denied. Let's say someone comes into my office and their I-751 just got denied. My first question will be, can we refile this form to reinstate their status? And the answer is usually yes. So what would I actually do in this situation? If they are still married to their spouse, I will just refile the I-751 form and submit more evidence. But let's say now the spouses are divorced. In that situation, I will file the I-751 again in a new category. Now let's take the example in a different direction. Let's say your I-751 was denied when you were still married to your spouse, but since then, your marriage has broken down and you are now divorced. My strategy is still the same. I will refile an I-751, but now instead of filing it jointly with your spouse, we will file it in a different category where we will select that your marriage was entered into in good faith, but it has now terminated through divorce. And actually, the evidence that we would submit in this situation is all the same. We would submit all the evidence to show that your marriage was initially entered into in good faith. I will also include a statement from you explaining what happened to the marriage from start to finish, and I'll include any evidence that shows how the marriage broke down. The reason I'm doing all of this is eventually an immigration officer is going to review your package, your evidence, and I want them to clearly understand how the marriage was entered into, what troubles you guys had during the marriage, and how the marriage broke down, and any evidence or communications or documents throughout this entire process that could help explain what you went through. When you apply for the I-751 based on divorce, there is almost always an interview. I've never seen a situation where the immigrant spouse who's trying to keep their permanent residence was not interviewed. But these interviews are generally not as hostile as I thought that they would be when I was a new lawyer. When we prepare detailed statements and we have a lot of evidence showing how the marriage started, the middle and the end of the marriage, how it broke down, the officers tend to understand, and I think what they see is a lot of people who go in there with no evidence. And so by comparison, when we prepare the case well, the interviews tend to be pretty short. Like the last few I went to were less than 15 minutes long. The officer started out with a hard tone, very hard and cold, but 10 minutes into it, they usually say like, okay, I believe you were in a real marriage and I'm gonna approve your case. And a huge burden is lifted off my client's shoulders when that happens. The one final thing I want to talk about is that when your I-751 gets denied, you need to do something about it pretty soon. I wouldn't do it myself because you are dangerously close to being placed into deportation proceedings. In fact, once your I-751 gets denied, typically speaking, under most presidential administrations, a process will begin that will eventually result in a notice to appear in immigration court being issued. And once that document arrives, all the immigration options that might have been available to you before are now probably much more expensive because you're going to also need to hire a lawyer to defend you in deportation court proceedings, in addition to probably refiling the I-751 or exploring any other options that may have been available to you. So if your I-751 does get denied, you are now in an emergency and it's not the time to try to figure it out by yourself. At this point, you really do need an immigration lawyer, because if you don't seek out a lawyer at that point, and I see this happen all the time, you're gonna end up paying way more by trying to do it yourself, making a mistake, and then needing to hire a lawyer to defend your deportation, in addition to refiling all the USCIS paperwork. The last idea that I would like to leave you guys with is that the rules about refiling an I-751 are not very intuitive. It doesn't really make sense. And I recall when I was first learning what to do in these situations, I was a bit shocked and surprised about how the options didn't really seem to make sense, but that there were actually a fair amount of options available. So if you find yourself in this situation, it's probably a good idea to consult with an immigration lawyer so that you can create a plan, and it will probably end up saving you more money than trying to do it yourself and making a mistake. Alright guys, that brings us to the end of today's video. If you have any specific questions about this topic, put them in the comments below. As you know, I do my best to answer all of your comments within 1 week of the video posting. If you're interested in learning more about these types of immigration topics, I dedicate the majority of my channel to helping people navigate the family-based immigration process. So if you want to learn more, subscribe. I post new videos on a weekly basis. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next week for another one.